Family gatherings are supposed to be warm, loving, and peaceful. In reality, they are a highly unstable social experiment involving alcohol, unresolved grudges, and people who have known your most embarrassing stories since you were 6. Every year, millions of families sit down at the same table thinking, this time will be normal. And every year, someone ruins everything. Maybe it's the uncle who drank too much and decided Thanksgiving dinner was the perfect moment to start a political podcast. Maybe it's the cousin who brought a new partner that nobody knew existed, including their spouse. Or the aunt who turned a casual conversation about potatoes into a full-scale investigation about why you're still single. Tonight we're diving into 101 of the weirdest, most chaotic family gathering stories ever witnessed. From accidental confessions and surprise scandals to dinner table meltdowns that ended holidays early. By the end of this list, one thing will become very clear. Your family might be strange, but compared to these people, you're doing just fine. 1. The Thanksgiving DNA bomb. Every Thanksgiving in Ohio, the Carter family followed the same comfortable routine. Turkey, mashed potatoes, awkward small talk, and someone pretending the cranberry sauce was homemade. That year, however, their cousin Melissa arrived with what she described as a fun family activity. Instead of board games, she handed everyone printed DNA ancestry reports she had ordered online for the entire family. At first, everyone laughed and compared percentages of Irish and German heritage. Then Melissa casually mentioned something strange. According to the results, her biological father wasn't actually Uncle Gary. The table went quiet. Uncle Gary stopped chewing. Aunt Linda slowly lowered her fork. Someone tried to make a joke that died instantly. Within 10 minutes, the conversation shifted from genealogy to a full-scale investigation of events that happened sometime in 1989. The turkey got cold. Nobody touched dessert. And the family never did that fun activity again. 2. The Christmas proposal catastrophe. During a large Christmas gathering in Texas, one cousin decided the holiday dinner would be the perfect moment for a surprise marriage proposal. He stood up dramatically in the middle of the living room, asked everyone for attention, and dropped to one knee in front of his girlfriend while relatives pulled out their phones. At first, it looked like a scene from a romantic movie. Then the girlfriend said something nobody expected. She hesitated, stared at him, and quietly asked if they could talk privately first. The room stayed frozen while the couple stepped into the kitchen. Through the wall, several relatives could hear muffled arguing followed by the phrase, "I thought we agreed we were breaking up after New Year's." 5 minutes later, they returned. No ring, no engagement. Just 40 people pretending the moment never happened, while someone awkwardly restarted the Christmas music. 3. The Drunk Uncle TED Talk. At a family reunion in Michigan, the event organizers planned a simple afternoon barbecue in a public park. Burgers, lawn chairs, and polite conversations about jobs and weather. Unfortunately, one uncle treated the open cooler of beer like a personal challenge. By the third drink, he became philosophical. By the sixth drink, he decided the entire family needed to hear his thoughts about modern society. He climbed onto a picnic table and began delivering what he described as important truths. For 20 minutes, he explained politics, relationships, and cryptocurrency to relatives who had only come for potato salad. Children stared. Grandparents looked exhausted. Eventually, the park ranger arrived and asked him to step down before the speech turned into a public disturbance. The family reunion photo was taken 5 minutes later. He was still mid-lecture. 4. The secret baby reveal. During a birthday dinner in California, the entire extended family gathered around a long restaurant table to celebrate Grandma's 81st birthday. Speeches were planned, cake was waiting. Everything seemed perfectly normal until one cousin stood up unexpectedly. She announced she had big news. Most people assumed it was a pregnancy announcement. Instead, she revealed that she had secretly given birth 6 months earlier. Then, she placed a baby carrier on the table. The room went silent while relatives tried to process how an entire human child had existed for half a year without anyone noticing. Questions started flying immediately. Where had the baby been? Why hadn't anyone been told? Who was the father? Grandma never finished her birthday speech, but she did spend the rest of the night staring at the baby like it had just teleported into the family. 5. The group chat disaster. One family in New Jersey organized their holiday dinner using a large group chat so everyone could coordinate dishes and arrival times. The system worked perfectly for years, until one cousin accidentally sent a message to the wrong thread. Instead of texting a friend privately, he sent a long rant into the family chat, describing exactly which relatives he disliked and why. He criticized Aunt Karen's cooking. He mocked his brother's job. He even ranked the entire family from tolerable to unbearable. The message stayed visible for about 30 seconds before he deleted it. Unfortunately, 30 seconds is more than enough time for screenshots. By the time he arrived at dinner, everyone had already read it. The evening remained polite, just noticeably colder than usual. 6. The Thanksgiving Turkey Turf War. Every Thanksgiving in Illinois, the Matthews family followed a strict, unspoken tradition. Grandma cooked the turkey. She had done it for 35 years, and nobody questioned the arrangement. Until one year, when her daughter-in-law, freshly inspired by a cooking show, arrived carrying her own fully prepared turkey. At first, everyone assumed it was a backup. Then she announced that her recipe was a little more modern and suggested they compare both birds. Grandma didn't say anything. She simply stared at the second turkey sitting next to hers like it was a personal insult wrapped in aluminum foil. Dinner became a silent competition. People took careful bites of each turkey while pretending not to rank them internally. Later that night, someone quietly revealed the results. Grandma's turkey had disappeared completely. The other one went home with its owner. 7. The accidental speakerphone confession. During a family dinner in Arizona, one cousin stepped outside to take what he described as an important phone call. The restaurant patio was crowded, so he walked a few steps away from the table. What he didn't realize was that his phone was connected to a Bluetooth speaker sitting in the center of the family table. When he answered the call, everyone suddenly heard his voice clearly. Then they heard the person on the other end. The conversation quickly revealed that he had told two different relatives completely different stories about why he missed last year's holiday. One version involved work, the other involved pretending to be sick. Within 30 seconds, the entire table understood the situation. No one turned off the speaker. They just sat quietly and listened to the explanation unravel in real time. 8. The Christmas gift that ended the party. One Christmas gathering in Pennsylvania started like every other year. Gifts under the tree, children running around, adults pretending wrapping paper was interesting. Then one aunt handed her sister a very specific gift. It was a framed photo. The picture showed her husband having dinner with another woman. At first, people assumed it was some kind of joke. Then the aunt calmly explained that she had hired a private investigator 2 months earlier. The entire living room froze while the husband tried to process how his secret date had just become a Christmas decoration. Nobody opened another gift after that. The tree stayed lit, the music kept playing, and the holiday ended about 2 hours earlier than planned. 9. The reunion talent show disaster. A large family reunion in Florida included a well-intentioned idea from the organizers: a talent show. The goal was simple: give relatives a chance to sing, dance, or perform something fun. For the first few acts, it worked perfectly. A child played the piano. Someone did a magic trick. Then one cousin stepped onto the stage and announced he would perform stand-up comedy. Unfortunately, his routine consisted almost entirely of jokes about other family members sitting in the audience. He mocked someone's divorce. He roasted another cousin's career. He even turned grandma's cooking into a punchline. People laughed at first. Then the laughter stopped. The talent show ended shortly after that. 10. The wedding speech investigation. At a wedding reception in Nevada, one uncle was asked to give a short, heartfelt toast. He stood up confidently, holding a glass of champagne, and began telling a story about the groom's wild years. The first few sentences sounded harmless. Then the details started getting specific. Very specific. He described a road trip that included a hotel room, 2 strangers, and an incident involving a broken lamp. Halfway through the story, the bride slowly turned toward her new husband. The room became completely silent. Someone quietly tried to signal the uncle to stop talking. He did not notice. The speech ended with applause, but the newly married couple spent the rest of the evening having a much more serious conversation than anyone expected. 11. The family game night interrogation. During a Christmas gathering in Minnesota, someone suggested playing a harmless party game called Two Truths and a Lie. The idea seemed innocent. Everyone would share 3 statements about themselves while the rest of the family guessed which one was fake. The game worked perfectly for the first few rounds. Then Aunt Rachel took her turn. Her 3 statements were delivered calmly. She once met a celebrity, she had been skydiving, and she had secretly been married before. The family laughed, assuming the last one was obviously the lie. Rachel shook her head. The room went quiet as she explained that the marriage had happened 15 years earlier and lasted almost a year. Several relatives quickly started calculating timelines. One of them realized something uncomfortable. That marriage overlapped with her current relationship. The game ended immediately. Nobody asked to play another round. 12. The Christmas Dinner Job Interview. At a large Christmas dinner in New York, one uncle decided the holiday was the perfect opportunity to help his nephew get serious about life. Instead of casual conversation, he began asking questions across the table like a corporate recruiter. What was the 5-year plan? What skills did the nephew bring to the workforce? Why exactly had he changed majors 3 times? At first the family laughed. Then the questions kept coming. Soon the conversation turned into a full performance review in front of 12 relatives eating mashed potatoes. The nephew tried to answer politely while everyone else stared at their plates. Finally, Grandma intervened and told the uncle to stop conducting job interviews during dinner. The nephew left early. The uncle later claimed he was just trying to motivate him. 13. The Thanksgiving Political Explosion. One Thanksgiving dinner in Virginia began peacefully with turkey, stuffing, and the usual polite small talk. Everyone knew there was one topic that should never be mentioned: politics. For almost an hour, the rule held. Then, one cousin made a casual comment about the economy. Another relative disagreed. Within seconds, the table turned into a televised debate nobody had asked for. Voices got louder. Forks stopped moving. Someone tried to change the subject to football, but it was already too late. 2 uncles began citing statistics from completely different news sources. Grandma slowly stood up, removed the gravy boat from the table, and announced dinner was finished. The argument continued in the driveway for another 20 minutes. Nobody remembered to take leftovers home. 14. The Surprise Karaoke Confession. During a family birthday party in California, the entertainment for the evening was karaoke. Most people sang harmless songs, old classics, holiday music, nothing dramatic. Then, one cousin, already several drinks into the evening, grabbed the microphone. Instead of singing, he started talking. At first, it sounded like a funny introduction to a song. Then, the speech became more emotional. He began apologizing to different relatives in the room for things he had done over the years. Some people laughed nervously. Others looked genuinely concerned. Eventually, he admitted he had borrowed money from 3 different family members and never paid it back. The karaoke machine kept playing instrumental music in the background. Nobody sang after that. 15. The holiday photo that started a fight. Every year, one large family in Colorado insisted on taking a formal group photo during their holiday gathering. The process usually took 5 minutes. That year, it took 40. The problem started when the photographer tried to arrange people by height. Someone complained they were always placed in the back. Another relative insisted married couples should stand together. Then someone pointed out that one cousin's ex-partner was still included in last year's framed photo on the wall. What began as simple positioning turned into a detailed discussion about family alliances, breakups, and who technically still counted as part of the group. The camera timer kept resetting. Eventually, the photo was taken. Half the people in it were visibly annoyed. 16. The Christmas Secret Santa Exposure. One large family in Washington organized a Secret Santa exchange every Christmas to avoid buying dozens of gifts. The rule was simple. Each person drew one name and kept it secret until the presents were opened. Everything worked smoothly for years, until one cousin accidentally sent a screenshot into the family group chat. The screenshot showed the entire Secret Santa list. Within seconds, everyone knew exactly who had been assigned to buy their gift. People began scrolling through the chat, comparing names and expected presents. One aunt immediately realized the cousin who drew her name had spent exactly $9. Another relative discovered his Secret Santa was the same person who still owed him money from last summer. By the time dinner started, the mystery was gone. But the awkwardness had doubled. 17. The Thanksgiving Inheritance Hint. During Thanksgiving dinner in North Carolina, conversation turned to harmless topics like travel plans and retirement. Then Grandpa casually mentioned that he had finally finished writing his will. At first, everyone nodded politely. Then he added one more sentence. He said the inheritance would go to the family members who actually visit. Several relatives suddenly became very interested in how often everyone else had been stopping by the house lately. People began comparing visits. Phone calls were mentioned. One cousin attempted to list every holiday he had attended in the past 5 years. Grandpa continued eating quietly while the conversation turned into a competition. No one asked about dessert. They were busy calculating future real estate. 18. The New Partner Introduction. At a 4th of July family barbecue in California, one cousin arrived with someone nobody had ever met before. He introduced her as his girlfriend. The family welcomed her politely, but after a few minutes, one aunt started staring carefully. Then another relative whispered something. Eventually, someone realized the problem. The new girlfriend looked exactly like the woman the cousin had dated 3 years earlier, the one who had disappeared after a dramatic breakup. Someone finally asked if they had gotten back together. The cousin hesitated, then admitted they had secretly reunited 6 months ago and didn't tell anyone because the last breakup was awkward. That explanation did not make the situation less awkward. 19. The group chat wedding leak. Before a wedding in Georgia, the entire extended family used a group chat to coordinate travel plans and hotel bookings. One cousin accidentally sent a message meant for a friend into the family chat. The message read, "Can you believe they're spending this much money on a wedding when the marriage probably won't last a year?" The message sat there, visible, undeleted, for 20 seconds. Someone typed, "Wrong chat?" The cousin immediately deleted the message. Unfortunately, screenshots travel faster than apologies. The wedding still happened, but the seating chart became very strategic. 20. The Holiday Cooking Competition. One Christmas gathering in Wisconsin unintentionally turned into a cooking competition. It started when two sisters both brought homemade pies. One claimed hers followed the original family recipe. The other insisted she had improved it. Relatives were asked to taste both. At first, the comments were polite. Then someone said one pie was clearly better. The room shifted instantly. The sisters began debating ingredients: butter versus shortening, fresh fruit versus canned. Within minutes, the conversation turned into a full culinary courtroom drama. Grandpa quietly ate a slice of both pies and declared them identical. No one believed him. But dessert ended there. 21. The Thanksgiving Projector Disaster. During a large Thanksgiving gathering in Oregon, one cousin volunteered to show a slideshow of family memories using a projector connected to his laptop. The idea sounded wholesome: old vacation photos, childhood birthdays, maybe a few embarrassing teenage hairstyles. For the first few minutes, everything worked perfectly. Pictures of camping trips, school graduations, family pets. Then the slideshow stopped. The screen switched to the laptop desktop, and a folder appeared. The folder name was not family-friendly. Someone in the room gasped. Someone else laughed nervously. The cousin rushed to close the window, but the projector displayed everything in high definition for about 5 seconds. 5 seconds is long enough for an entire room to understand what they just saw. The slideshow ended immediately. No one asked for another presentation. 22. The surprise engagement that wasn't. At a large Easter gathering in Florida, One cousin stood up halfway through dinner and asked for everyone's attention. The room went quiet as he explained he had an important announcement. People started smiling. Family members assumed a proposal was coming. He turned toward his girlfriend and began a heartfelt speech about love, commitment, and the future. Then he pulled out a small box. Before he could finish the sentence, the girlfriend raised her hand. She gently stopped him. Then she explained, very calmly, that they had broken up 2 weeks earlier. Apparently, he had not accepted that information. The room stayed silent while he slowly put the ring away. Dinner resumed shortly after, very quietly. 23. The Christmas Business Pitch. During a Christmas dinner in Arizona, one cousin arrived unusually enthusiastic about life. He greeted everyone warmly, complimented the decorations, and asked a lot of questions about people's financial goals. At first, it seemed like normal conversation. Then dessert arrived, and he stood up. What followed was a 20-minute presentation about a life-changing business opportunity. Charts appeared on his tablet. Words like passive income and early retirement filled the room. Within minutes, everyone realized this was not a casual conversation. It was a multi-level marketing pitch. One aunt slowly pushed her chair back and left the table. Another relative pretended to take an urgent phone call. The presentation ended when Grandma asked a simple question. Why would I recruit my own family? 24. The Family Tree Argument. At a reunion in Kentucky, someone brought a detailed printed family tree chart tracing several generations of relatives. The chart covered an entire dining table and sparked immediate curiosity. People began pointing at names, great-grandparents, cousins, old family stories. Then, one uncle noticed something strange. A branch of the tree included a name he had never seen before. He asked who that person was. Another relative hesitated before explaining that the chart included a few complicated situations from the past. Suddenly, the room turned into a genealogy investigation. Dates were questioned, relationships were re-examined. One cousin eventually realized that the mysterious name explained a rumor that had circulated in the family for 30 years. The chart was quietly folded up after that. 25. The New Year's Resolution Intervention. During a New Year's Day family brunch in New Jersey, conversation turned toward resolutions for the coming year. Most people mentioned harmless goals: exercise more, eat healthier, travel somewhere new. Then, one aunt decided to help. She began suggesting resolutions for other family members. One cousin should probably stop switching jobs so often. Another relative should maybe think about settling down. The advice kept coming. Each suggestion became slightly more personal. Eventually, one cousin asked the obvious question. Did anyone ask you for this? The room went silent. The resolution discussion ended immediately. 26. The Thanksgiving DNA Test Reveal. During a Thanksgiving dinner in Pennsylvania, one cousin arrived with what she described as a fun family experiment. She had ordered several Ancestry DNA kits and thought it would be interesting if everyone compared their results during dinner. At first, the conversation stayed light. People compared percentages of Irish, German, and Italian ancestry while joking about family traits. Then one cousin noticed something unusual. According to the results, he shared significantly less DNA with his older brother than expected. The table went quiet. Someone suggested the results might be inaccurate. Unfortunately, another relative had taken the same test earlier that year and confirmed the same pattern. The conversation slowly shifted from ancestry percentages to events that happened sometime in the early 1990s. The DNA discussion ended quickly. The questions did not. 27. The Christmas X Appearance. During a Christmas dinner in California, one cousin arrived with a new partner everyone was meeting for the first time. The family welcomed her warmly and tried to make the evening comfortable. About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Another guest arrived. It was his ex-girlfriend. Apparently, she had been invited months earlier by a relative who didn't realize they had broken up. The room immediately divided into two awkward social zones. The current girlfriend sat quietly at one end of the table. The ex sat at the other. The cousins spent the entire dinner attempting to maintain two separate conversations without making eye contact across the room. Everyone finished their food very quickly. 28. The birthday speech that went too far. At a birthday celebration in Illinois, one cousin volunteered to give a heartfelt speech honoring the guest of honor. The microphone was passed to him after dinner, and everyone expected a few warm words. The speech started well. He shared childhood memories and funny stories. Then the stories became increasingly specific. He mentioned several embarrassing moments from the birthday person's teenage years. Then he described a story involving a failed business idea. Then another involving a former relationship. The audience began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Someone attempted to signal him to wrap up the speech. He misunderstood the gesture as encouragement. The speech lasted 12 minutes. Nobody asked for another toast that evening. 29. The 4th of July fireworks incident. At a large 4th of July barbecue in Texas, one enthusiastic relative volunteered to organize the fireworks display. He assured everyone he had done this before. The family gathered in the backyard to watch. The first firework worked perfectly. The second one tilted slightly. The third launched sideways across the lawn before exploding harmlessly near a fence. Children screamed. Adults scattered. The amateur fireworks coordinator immediately insisted everything was still under control. That statement became less convincing when the next firework refused to launch at all. The display ended early. The family still talks about that barbecue, mostly as a reminder that confidence and expertise are not the same thing. 30. The holiday photo editing argument. One family in Massachusetts had a tradition of posting a large group photo after every holiday gathering. Usually, someone would upload the picture online within a few hours. This year, however, the person responsible for editing the photo decided to make a small adjustment. He used a filter. Unfortunately, the filter made several people look dramatically different. One aunt noticed her face had been smoothed so much she barely recognized herself. Another relative complained that someone else appeared noticeably brighter in the image. Soon, the discussion turned into a debate about favoritism in photo editing. Within an hour, 3 different versions of the same family photo were circulating online. No one could agree which one looked fair. 31. The Thanksgiving Secret Recipe War. Every Thanksgiving in Missouri, the family insisted on serving the same sweet potato casserole recipe that had supposedly been passed down for generations. The recipe was treated like a sacred document, guarded carefully by one aunt who claimed only she knew the original version. That year, however, another relative arrived with a printed copy of the same recipe, except the ingredients were completely different. Suddenly, 2 versions of the original family recipe existed. Both cooks insisted theirs was authentic. One claimed the recipe came from Grandma, the other claimed it came from Great-Grandma. Within minutes, the kitchen turned into a historical investigation involving handwritten notes, faded cookbooks, and several conflicting childhood memories. Grandma eventually ended the argument with a simple sentence. She admitted she had copied the recipe from a magazine in 1984. 32. The Christmas Credit Card Revelation. During a Christmas gathering in Florida, the family was casually discussing holiday expenses when one cousin joked about how expensive gifts had become. Another relative laughed and said, "At least you're not paying for everyone else's." The room paused. Apparently, several family members had recently noticed unfamiliar charges on a shared account used for organizing family events. Someone asked a few questions. The cousin who managed the account suddenly looked very interested in the Christmas tree decorations. Within minutes, the discussion shifted from holiday shopping to a detailed review of credit card statements. Nobody raised their voice. They simply read the numbers out loud. The evening continued, but the person responsible for managing the family account was quietly replaced the following week. 33. The Family Trivia Game Backfire. At a reunion in Indiana, one enthusiastic cousin organized a trivia game based entirely on family history. The goal was simple: answer questions about relatives, old events, and childhood memories. The first questions were easy: birthdays, favorite foods, vacation stories. Then the questions became oddly specific. One card asked which relative had secretly moved out for 2 months during college. Another asked which cousin had been suspended from school. People began realizing the trivia game had been created by someone who apparently knew far too many family secrets. The laughter slowly faded. Eventually, someone asked where the questions came from. The cousin proudly explained he had gathered information from years of family gossip. The game ended shortly after that. 34. The Easter dinner seating crisis. During an Easter dinner in Ohio, the host attempted to organize seating arrangements carefully to avoid potential arguments between certain relatives. The plan worked perfectly on paper. Unfortunately, several people arrived late. Chairs had to be rearranged. One relative ended up sitting next to someone they hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Another cousin discovered they had been placed at the kids' table despite being 32 years old. Soon the conversation shifted away from dinner entirely. People began negotiating seating positions like diplomats at a peace conference. The host eventually gave up. Everyone sat wherever they wanted. Dinner finally started 40 minutes late. 35. The family talent show secret. At a large summer reunion in Georgia, someone suggested organizing a small talent show for entertainment. Most performances were harmless. Singing, magic tricks. One cousin played guitar. Then, one teenager decided to perform a short comedy routine. At first, the jokes were about school and daily life. Then the material shifted toward family topics. The teenager apparently had been listening to adult conversations for years. Several jokes referenced arguments, awkward relationships, and secrets nobody expected a 16-year-old to know. The audience laughed nervously. Parents stared at each other. The performance ended with loud applause, mostly because everyone wanted it to end quickly. 36. The Thanksgiving Forgotten. Invite. During a large Thanksgiving gathering in Michigan, the host proudly announced that every single family member had finally made it this year. The house was full, the table was crowded, and the atmosphere felt unusually peaceful. Then the doorbell rang. Standing outside was one cousin, holding a pie. The room inside went quiet because nobody had expected him to come. After a few seconds of confusion, someone realized the problem. He had never actually been invited. Apparently, the host assumed someone else had contacted him. Meanwhile, he assumed the invitation was obvious because everyone else was coming. The pie was accepted. The cousin stayed. But the awkward realization that the entire family had accidentally excluded someone lingered for the rest of dinner. 37. The Christmas Laptop Discovery. During a Christmas gathering in Colorado, one relative asked to borrow a cousin's laptop to print a few family photos for a scrapbook project. The cousin handed it over without thinking. While connecting the laptop to the printer, the screen displayed several open browser tabs. One of them contained a long online post written earlier that day. The title of the post was, "How I Survive Visiting My Extremely Difficult Family Every Year." The author's name was clearly visible. The room slowly filled with relatives reading the post over the person's shoulder. The article described several family members in uncomfortable detail. The laptop was quietly closed. The scrapbook project ended early. 38. The Wedding Plus One Surprise. At a wedding reception in Nevada, guests were allowed to bring a plus one, even if the partner hadn't met the family yet. One cousin arrived with a guest nobody recognized. At first, people assumed it was simply a new relationship. But during dinner conversation, several relatives noticed something strange. The guests seemed to know an unusual amount of family history. Old vacation stories, names of distant cousins, childhood memories. Eventually, someone asked the obvious question, how did she know so much about the family? The answer came quickly. She had dated a different cousin 5 years earlier. Nobody had realized she was returning to the family through a different relationship. 39. The Family Business Announcement. During a large reunion in California, the oldest brother in the family decided it was time to discuss the future of the family business. He stood up after dinner and announced that he had an important update. Everyone expected routine financial news. Instead, he revealed that he had already sold the company. The problem was that several relatives believed they still owned shares. Questions began immediately. Who approved the sale? When did it happen? Why had nobody been informed? The brother attempted to explain that it was a strategic decision. The explanation did not improve the mood. The reunion ended early. The legal discussions lasted much longer. 40. The holiday baby timeline. During a holiday dinner in New Jersey, one cousin announced she was expecting a baby. The room immediately filled with excitement and congratulations. People asked when the baby was due. She happily shared the expected date. Then someone at the table started counting. Another relative checked the calendar. A quiet calculation spread around the room. The timeline suggested the pregnancy had started several months earlier than expected, specifically during a time when the cousin had been publicly dating someone else. Nobody said anything directly, but several relatives began exchanging glances across the table. The congratulations continued, slightly slower than before. 41. The Thanksgiving DNA follow-up. At a Thanksgiving dinner in New York, one cousin proudly announced she had brought updated DNA ancestry results for several family members who had recently taken new tests. Everyone assumed it would be another harmless conversation about heritage. At first it was. Percentages were compared, ethnic backgrounds were discussed. Then she noticed something strange in the new results. Two cousins who believed they were full siblings appeared to share only half the expected DNA. The room slowly went quiet while everyone looked at the chart again. Someone suggested the company might have made a mistake. Unfortunately, another relative had taken the test using a completely different service. The results were identical. Dinner continued, but the conversation quietly shifted toward family history sometime around the early 1990s. 42. The Christmas Truth or Drink Game. During a Christmas gathering in Arizona, several younger cousins introduced a party game called Truth or Drink. The rules were simple. Answer a personal question honestly or take a shot. At first, the questions were harmless. Favorite movies, embarrassing childhood moments. Then someone asked a question about past relationships. Another question followed. Then a third. Within 20 minutes, the game had turned into a public interview about romantic history. One cousin admitted to secretly dating someone else's ex. Another revealed a breakup nobody had known about. The older relatives watched the entire situation unfold in quiet disbelief. Eventually, one aunt asked if the game could be stopped before anyone learned something they couldn't forget. The drinks were put away. The silence stayed. 43. The surprise guest at the reunion. At a large family reunion in Tennessee, everyone gathered at a rented event hall for dinner and speeches. Halfway through the evening, one distant relative arrived with a guest nobody recognized. He introduced the woman politely. Then he explained something unexpected. She was his biological daughter. The announcement surprised everyone because nobody in the room had known he had a child. Apparently, he had recently discovered her through a genealogy website. The daughter looked just as overwhelmed as everyone else. People offered congratulations. Someone brought her a chair. The reunion continued. But several relatives quietly realized the family tree had just gained a new branch. 44. The Christmas Photo Album Discovery. During a Christmas gathering in Wisconsin, an old family photo album was passed around the living room. The pictures showed holidays from decades earlier. People laughed at old hairstyles and outdated clothing. Then someone noticed a photograph from a vacation many years ago. In the background of the photo stood a person nobody could identify. One relative asked who it was. Another relative hesitated before answering. Apparently, the person in the background had once dated someone in the family, while also secretly dating another member of the family at the same time. The room became very quiet. The album was gently closed. Nobody asked to see the rest of the photos. 45. The New Year's Eve Secret Toast. At a New Year's Eve family party in Nevada, the host asked everyone to raise a glass and share something positive about the past year. The idea was meant to start the new year on a warm note. Most people gave short, polite answers. Then one uncle stood up. He explained that the past year had been life-changing. He thanked several family members for their support during a difficult time. Then he mentioned something unexpected. He had recently taken a DNA test that helped him reconnect with someone important. The room waited for the rest of the story. He smiled and raised his glass. "To my biological family," he said. Several relatives suddenly realized the phrase carried more meaning than expected. 46. The Thanksgiving Group Chat Explosion. During a Thanksgiving gathering in Chicago, the family had been using a large group chat all week to coordinate food and arrival times. Everything worked smoothly until dinner actually started. Halfway through the meal, one cousin looked down at his phone and suddenly froze. A message had just appeared in the group chat. The message was clearly not meant for the family. It was a long complaint about the exact dinner happening at that moment. It criticized the turkey. It mocked several relatives by name. It even described the gathering as the annual endurance test. The cousin quickly deleted the message. Unfortunately, the message had already been read by most people at the table. Dinner continued, just with noticeably less conversation. 47. The Christmas Surprise Document. During a Christmas gathering in North Carolina, one relative decided it was time to discuss some important paperwork about the family's old vacation property. He placed several documents on the dining table. At first, everyone assumed it was a casual update. Then someone started reading the first page. The document was a draft of a will. It included a detailed list of who would inherit which parts of the property. Several names were missing. Several other names had been added. Within seconds, the room shifted from holiday cheer to quiet legal curiosity. Questions started carefully. Who wrote the document? Why were some people included and others not? The paperwork was quietly folded back into its envelope. Christmas dinner resumed. Very carefully. 48. The Drunk Toast Revelation. At a wedding reception in Florida, one uncle had clearly enjoyed the open bar long before the speeches began. When it was his turn to give a toast, he walked confidently to the microphone. The first part sounded perfectly normal. He praised the couple, he congratulated the families. Then he decided to share a fun memory. Unfortunately, the memory involved the groom and someone who was not the bride. The uncle continued the story with enthusiasm, while the bride slowly turned toward her new husband. Several relatives attempted to signal the uncle to stop. He interpreted the gestures as encouragement. The speech ended with polite applause. The marriage began with several unexpected questions. 49. The Reunion DNA. Curveball. At a summer reunion in Oregon, several younger relatives brought along ancestry DNA results they had recently received. The idea was to compare heritage and discover interesting family history. For the first few minutes, the conversation was fun. People laughed about distant ancestors and unexpected nationalities. Then, one cousin noticed something unusual in the comparison chart. Two relatives who believed they were closely related appeared to share almost no genetic connection. The explanation was not immediately obvious. Someone suggested the results might be wrong. Another cousin quietly mentioned that DNA tests are usually very accurate. The conversation changed direction quickly. The reunion continued, but the family tree suddenly looked more complicated than anyone expected. 50. The New Year's Family Meeting. During a New Year's gathering in California, one relative announced that the family needed to have a quick meeting before midnight. Everyone assumed it would be about vacation plans or scheduling future events. Instead, he explained that he had recently discovered something surprising about the family history. Apparently, an old financial agreement made decades earlier had never been fully explained. Several relatives were technically entitled to money from a property sale that had happened years ago. The announcement created immediate curiosity. People started asking questions. Others began calculating dates and amounts. The countdown to midnight happened quietly in the background. The new year arrived. The discussion did not end. 51. The Thanksgiving Helpful Speech. During a large Thanksgiving dinner in Iowa, one uncle decided the holiday was the perfect moment to offer what he described as constructive advice to the younger generation of the family. At first, it sounded harmless. He talked about career choices and financial responsibility. Then he began mentioning specific relatives. One cousin should stop changing jobs every year. Another should consider moving out of their parents' house. The speech slowly turned into a public performance review. Several family members suddenly became very interested in their mashed potatoes. Eventually, Grandma interrupted the speech with a simple question. "Did anyone ask you for advice tonight?" The uncle stopped talking. Dinner resumed, quietly. 52. The Christmas Playlist Incident. At a Christmas gathering in California, one cousin volunteered to control the music playlist for the evening. He connected his phone to the living room speakers and started playing holiday songs. Everything went smoothly for about 20 minutes. Then, the music suddenly stopped. Instead, the speakers began playing a voice recording. It was clearly a private conversation. The cousin had accidentally connected the wrong audio file. Within seconds, the room realized the recording was a phone conversation where he had been complaining about several relatives. The recording stopped quickly, but not before several people heard their names mentioned. The music returned. No one commented on the playlist again. 53. The family vacation budget debate. At a summer family gathering in Florida, someone suggested planning a large vacation for the following year. The idea sounded exciting. A beach house, a full week together. Then someone asked the obvious question, how much will this cost? What began as a casual suggestion quickly turned into a financial debate. Some relatives preferred luxury hotels. Others insisted on saving money. One cousin quietly mentioned that not everyone in the family had the same budget. The discussion continued for 40 minutes. In the end, no vacation was planned. But everyone learned far more about each other's finances than expected. 54. The Holiday Childhood Story. During a holiday dinner in New Jersey, one aunt decided to share a funny childhood story about one of her nephews. The story began innocently. It involved a school project and a small misunderstanding with a teacher. Then the details kept coming. Apparently, the misunderstanding had included a prank. The prank had involved several classmates, and the situation had ended with the principal calling the parents. The nephew, now an adult sitting at the table, had never told anyone this story. He tried to interrupt. The aunt kept talking. By the end of the story, the entire family knew more about his teenage years than he intended. 55. The birthday cake timing problem. At a birthday party in Texas, the family gathered around the cake to sing for the guest of honor. Everything was ready. Candles lit, phones recording. Then someone realized the birthday person wasn't actually in the room. They had stepped outside to take a phone call. The candles continued burning while everyone waited. After a few minutes, the frosting began melting slightly. Someone suggested blowing the candles out early. Another insisted they should wait. Eventually, the guest of honor returned. The candles were relit, the song was sung, but the cake had already started leaning slightly to one side. 56. The Thanksgiving Forgotten Allergy. During a large Thanksgiving dinner in Maryland, one relative proudly prepared a new dessert recipe she had found online. She placed the dish in the center of the table and encouraged everyone to try it. At first, people complimented the flavor. Then, one cousin paused mid-bite. He quietly asked what ingredients were in the dessert. The answer included peanuts. Unfortunately, the cousin had mentioned his peanut allergy at nearly every family gathering for the past decade. Several relatives suddenly looked very concerned. The cousin remained calm, but decided it was safer not to continue eating the dessert. The host apologized repeatedly. The dish was removed from the table, and someone quickly suggested switching to pumpkin pie instead. 57. The Christmas Gift Receipt Discovery. At a Christmas gathering in Michigan, the family tradition was to open gifts one at a time while everyone watched. One aunt handed a wrapped box to her sister with a big smile. The gift looked expensive. When the wrapping paper came off, the present turned out to be a small kitchen appliance. The recipient thanked her warmly. Then something slipped out of the box. It was the gift receipt. Unfortunately, the receipt clearly showed the item had been purchased earlier that same afternoon during a clearance sale. The room stayed polite. Everyone complimented the appliance, but the phrase "thoughtful gift" was used a little less enthusiastically than usual. 58. The Reunion Name Confusion. At a large family reunion in Georgia, several distant relatives were meeting each other for the first time in years. The introductions took a while because the family tree had grown significantly. One uncle attempted to greet a younger relative warmly. Unfortunately, he used the wrong name. The mistake might have gone unnoticed, except he used the name of a completely different cousin, a cousin who had been sitting 2 chairs away the entire time. The room paused briefly. The uncle quickly corrected himself and laughed. The younger relative smiled politely, but several people realized something quietly uncomfortable. Some branches of the family had become strangers to each other. 59. The holiday video montage. During a New Year's gathering in Illinois, one cousin prepared a video montage of family memories from the past year. The idea was meant to celebrate good moments and make everyone laugh. The video began with vacation clips and birthday photos. Everyone enjoyed watching. Then, a short clip appeared showing a backyard barbecue from earlier in the summer. In the background of the video, two relatives were clearly arguing. Neither of them realized they had been filmed. The argument lasted only a few seconds in the clip, but it was long enough for several people in the room to recognize the moment. The video continued. No one mentioned the argument. 60. The holiday seating strategy. At a large holiday dinner in Ohio, the host spent nearly an hour carefully arranging seating around the table. The goal was simple: avoid placing certain relatives next to each other. The plan worked perfectly at first. Then, someone decided to switch seats so they could sit closer to the food. That small change caused a chain reaction. Within minutes, two relatives who had not spoken in years were suddenly seated side by side. Conversation at that end of the table became extremely quiet. The host watched the situation unfold silently. Dinner continued. But the seating chart experiment was never attempted again. 61. The Thanksgiving recipe investigation. During a Thanksgiving dinner in Indiana, the host proudly served a new gravy recipe she claimed had taken hours to prepare. The family complimented the flavor immediately. Several relatives asked how she had made it. She described roasting bones, simmering herbs, and carefully reducing the sauce. Everything sounded impressively homemade. Then, one cousin walked into the kitchen to grab more water. Sitting next to the stove was an empty container of store-bought gravy mix. The discovery was not dramatic. The cousin simply returned to the table and continued eating. A few minutes later, someone casually asked if the recipe involved a packet. The host smiled and admitted the truth. The gravy was still finished quickly. 62. The Christmas photo caption problem. At a Christmas gathering in Washington, one cousin volunteered to post the family photo on social media. Everyone gathered in the living room and posed for the picture. The photo looked great. The problem came later. When the post went online, the caption jokingly described the gathering as "surviving another year with these people." Several relatives assumed it was harmless humor. Others felt the phrase sounded slightly less affectionate. Within an hour, the comment section filled with family members debating whether the caption was funny or disrespectful. The photo stayed online. The caption was quietly edited. 63. The reunion name tag experiment. At a large family reunion in Kentucky, the organizers tried something new to help distant relatives remember each other's names. Everyone received a name tag. At first, the idea worked perfectly. People greeted each other easily. Then someone noticed the name tags also included labels like second cousin, great aunt, and in-law. Soon the room filled with people comparing their exact positions in the family tree. Some relationships were more complicated than expected. Several relatives discovered they had misunderstood how they were related for years. The name tags stayed on, but the family tree suddenly required several new explanations. 64. The holiday dessert ranking. During a holiday dinner in California, one enthusiastic relative suggested ranking the desserts as a fun family activity. Each person would vote for their favorite. The idea seemed harmless. Everyone tasted small portions, then the votes were counted. The results placed one dessert clearly at the bottom. Unfortunately, the person who made that dessert was sitting directly at the table, watching the results. Several relatives quickly insisted the ranking system had been unfair. Others suggested the votes had been misunderstood. The dessert still disappeared eventually, but the ranking experiment was never repeated. 65. The birthday toast timing. At a birthday party in New York, several relatives planned short speeches to celebrate the guest of honor. The first few toasts were warm and sincere. Then one cousin decided to give a longer speech. He began by describing childhood memories. The speech continued, then continued. After several minutes, people began checking their phones quietly. The cousin eventually noticed the room had grown very quiet. He wrapped up the speech with a final heartfelt sentence. The applause was polite, but the remaining speakers suddenly decided their toasts could be much shorter. 66. The Thanksgiving Helpful Comparison. During a Thanksgiving dinner in Wisconsin, one relative decided to compliment the host's cooking. Unfortunately, the compliment included a comparison. He explained that the turkey was almost as good as Grandma's used to be. At first, the comment sounded harmless. Then, several relatives began discussing which Thanksgiving meals had been the best over the years. People started naming specific cooks, specific dishes, specific years. Within minutes, the conversation had quietly turned into a ranking of past holiday dinners. The current host listened carefully while smiling politely. Someone eventually tried to change the subject to football. Dinner continued. But the compliments became much more carefully worded after that. 67. The Christmas Gift Guessing Game. At a Christmas gathering in Colorado, the family played a guessing game before opening gifts. Each person tried to predict what they had received based on the shape of the package. The game was meant to build excitement. One cousin confidently announced that his present had to be a gaming console. The box was the right size. Everyone watched as he opened it. Inside was a cookbook. The cousin tried to recover quickly by saying he had recently been interested in cooking. Several relatives nodded politely. The cookbook was later placed quietly on a shelf. 68. The Reunion. Childhood nickname return. During a large family reunion in Texas, several older relatives began reminiscing about childhood memories. One aunt decided to bring back an old nickname for one of her nephews. She used the nickname loudly across the room. The problem was that the nickname had been based on a very embarrassing childhood incident. The nephew, now an adult with co-workers attending the reunion as guests, froze instantly. The story behind the nickname started being retold. Several people laughed. The nephew attempted to interrupt the explanation. The story finished anyway. The nickname was not used again, at least not out loud. 69. The Holiday Parking Argument. At a crowded holiday gathering in New Jersey, the driveway quickly filled with cars as relatives arrived. Parking became limited, and several vehicles had to block each other in. At first, the situation seemed manageable. Then one cousin needed to leave early. The owner of the car blocking him couldn't find their keys. Several relatives began searching through coats and purses. Someone suggested moving another car instead. Within minutes, the driveway turned into a small logistical crisis involving 3 vehicles and 6 people giving directions. Eventually, the correct keys were found, but the process took nearly 30 minutes. Dinner had already started without them. 70. The Holiday Fun Fact Reveal. During a New Year's dinner in California, the family played a simple icebreaker game where each person shared a surprising fact about themselves. Most answers were harmless. Favorite hobbies, old travel stories. Then one cousin shared his fact. He explained that he had recently discovered something interesting about his past through an old set of documents. Apparently, he had briefly lived in another country as a child. Several relatives looked confused. The cousin's parents slowly realized he was referring to a period they had never actually discussed with the rest of the family. The conversation paused. Someone suggested it might be time for dessert. 71. The Thanksgiving Leftover Strategy. During a Thanksgiving dinner in Ohio, several relatives were already discussing leftovers before the meal had even ended. The host had carefully packed extra containers so people could take food home. At first, everyone politely said they would only take a little. Then someone asked who had brought the containers. Another relative quietly began setting aside certain dishes. Within minutes, people started claiming leftovers in advance. One cousin mentioned he had been thinking about the stuffing all week. Another said the pie would not survive the drive home unless it went with her. The host watched the negotiation quietly. By the time dinner finished, most of the leftovers had already been assigned. 72. The Christmas Childhood Photo Reveal. At a Christmas gathering in Oregon, one aunt brought a stack of old printed photographs from the early 2000s. The idea was to laugh about old hairstyles and childhood fashion choices. Everyone enjoyed flipping through the pictures. Then, one photo appeared that showed several teenagers at a party many years earlier. Most people laughed at the outfits. One cousin did not laugh. Apparently, the party in the photo had been described very differently to his parents at the time. The room became quiet while the timeline was reconsidered. Someone quickly suggested looking at the next photo. The stack was closed soon after. 73. The reunion. Cooking advice. During a summer reunion in Georgia, several relatives gathered in the kitchen while preparing dinner together. One aunt began offering cooking advice to the host. At first, it sounded helpful. She suggested adding more seasoning. Then she recommended a different cooking method. Eventually, she took the spoon and stirred the dish herself. The host stepped aside politely. Several relatives exchanged glances across the kitchen. The aunt eventually declared the dish fixed. Dinner was served shortly after. Everyone complimented the food, but the host quietly decided to cook alone next year. 74. The holiday travel story. During a holiday dinner in Arizona, one cousin started telling a story about a recent trip abroad. The story began normally with descriptions of airports and hotels. Then the details became more unusual. He mentioned meeting someone from another country. Then he described staying longer than planned. Several relatives realized the timeline overlapped with a period when he had told the family he was busy with work. No one interrupted the story. They simply listened while the travel details slowly explained several unanswered questions from the past year. The story ended with applause, mostly because people were relieved it was finished. 75. The family game night scoreboard. At a large gathering in Michigan, the family organized a board game tournament to keep everyone entertained after dinner. The games were meant to be casual and fun. Someone created a scoreboard. At first, the competition remained friendly. Then the scores became more serious. People started debating rules. One cousin insisted a move had been illegal. Another argued the scoreboard had been updated incorrectly. The discussion grew surprisingly intense for a game involving plastic pieces and cardboard. Eventually, Grandma declared the entire tournament a tie. The scoreboard disappeared shortly after. 76. The Thanksgiving healthy choice debate. During a Thanksgiving dinner in California, one cousin arrived with a dish he proudly described as a healthier alternative to the traditional menu. It was a large bowl of quinoa salad with vegetables and a homemade dressing. The family thanked him politely. Then someone asked where it should go on the table. The quinoa ended up between the mashed potatoes and the gravy. For the first 20 minutes of dinner, nobody touched it. Eventually, the cousin encouraged everyone to try it. Several relatives took very small portions. One uncle asked quietly if it was meant to replace stuffing. Another relative suggested it might be better suited for a summer picnic. The salad stayed on the table, mostly untouched. 77. The Christmas early arrival. At a Christmas gathering in Illinois, one cousin decided to arrive early to help the host prepare dinner. He believed it would be a thoughtful gesture. The host opened the door and looked surprised. Apparently, he had arrived almost 2 hours before the official start time. Inside the house, the host was still cooking in comfortable clothes and had not finished setting up decorations. The cousin offered to help. The host tried to remain polite while suddenly accelerating every preparation task. Within minutes, the quiet kitchen turned into a rushed cooking session with unexpected supervision. The rest of the family arrived later to find everything perfectly ready. The host smiled politely. But the next year, invitations included a very specific arrival time. 78. The reunion memory disagreement. During a large family reunion in Tennessee, several relatives started discussing an old vacation they had taken together many years earlier. At first, the conversation was nostalgic. People remembered the beach, the hotel, and the long road trip. Then, someone mentioned a specific incident involving a lost suitcase. Two relatives immediately disagreed about what had actually happened. Soon, 3 different versions of the same story were being told. Each person insisted their memory was correct. Other family members joined the debate. Eventually, the discussion turned into a full reconstruction of events from 15 years earlier. No one could agree on the final version. 79. The holiday playlist mystery. At a New Year's party in New York, one cousin volunteered to handle the music playlist. The speakers filled the room with upbeat songs while relatives talked and celebrated. Then, an unexpected song started playing. The track was clearly not part of the planned playlist. Several people recognized it immediately. It was a song strongly associated with a very specific past relationship, involving two relatives at the party. Conversation slowed down. The cousin controlling the music quickly skipped the track. Someone joked that the playlist must have been on shuffle. The party continued, but the mood had shifted slightly. 80. The holiday board game strategy. At a large holiday gathering in Washington, several relatives decided to play a strategy board game after dinner. The rules were simple, and the competition was meant to stay friendly. At first, everyone laughed and joked. Then, one player began taking the game extremely seriously. He calculated every move carefully. He refused to make mistakes. Other players began losing quickly. After a while, the game stopped feeling like a casual activity. Several relatives started discussing dessert instead. Eventually, the serious player won the game. No one suggested playing again. 81. The Thanksgiving phone notification.
Merry Christmas, sweetie.
During a Thanksgiving dinner in Massachusetts, the entire family was sitting around the table when one cousin placed his phone face up next to his plate. Nobody paid much attention to it at first. Then, a notification appeared on the screen. Because the phone was positioned directly under the dining room lights, the message preview was clearly visible to several relatives sitting nearby. The message read, "Are you still pretending to be at the family dinner tonight?" Two cousins saw the message at the same time. They slowly looked at each other. The phone owner quickly turned the screen over and said it was just spam. Nobody asked further questions, but several people suddenly became curious about where he had actually been earlier that evening. 82. The Christmas helpful gift. At a Christmas gathering in Michigan, one aunt handed her nephew a carefully wrapped present with a proud smile. She explained that she had chosen something very practical. The nephew opened the box. Inside was a book. The title was clearly visible to everyone nearby. It was a self-improvement book about managing personal finances. The nephew nodded politely and thanked her. Several relatives tried to act as if the gift was completely normal, but the title remained visible on the coffee table for the rest of the evening. The nephew kept smiling, just slightly more carefully than before. 83. The Reunion Childhood Video. At a summer reunion in Kentucky, one relative decided to entertain the family by playing old home videos from the early 1990s. The footage showed birthday parties, school plays, and family vacations. Everyone laughed at the outdated hairstyles. Then, one video clip appeared showing several teenagers in the background during a backyard party. One of those teenagers, now an adult sitting on the couch, immediately leaned forward. Apparently, the video captured a moment he had previously described to his parents very differently. The clip lasted only a few seconds, but it was long enough to reopen a conversation about what had really happened that night many years ago. The video player was paused. The next clip was never shown. 84. The Holiday Dessert Claim. During a holiday dinner in Arizona, one relative proudly announced that the apple pie on the table was made completely from scratch. The family complimented the effort. Several people asked about the recipe. The baker explained the preparation in great detail. Then someone quietly noticed the aluminum pie tray. The label on the bottom was still partially attached. It belonged to a well-known local bakery. The discovery was not announced loudly. Instead, one cousin simply asked where the apples had been purchased. The baker admitted the truth shortly afterward. The pie was still eaten quickly. 85. The New Year's Resolution Suggestion. At a New Year's Day brunch in New Jersey, the family decided to go around the table and share their resolutions for the coming year. Most answers were simple: exercise more, travel somewhere new, learn a new hobby. Then, one aunt decided to help the conversation by suggesting resolutions for other people. She told one cousin he should consider changing careers. She suggested another relative should probably move to a larger apartment. The advice continued. Eventually, one cousin asked politely if anyone had actually requested the suggestions. The aunt laughed and said she was just being helpful. The resolution discussion ended soon after. 86. The Thanksgiving Calendar Realization. During a Thanksgiving dinner in Virginia, one cousin excitedly announced that he and his partner had recently started planning their wedding. The family immediately began asking questions about dates and locations. He happily shared the planned wedding month. Then someone asked when the couple had first started dating. The cousin answered casually. Several relatives began doing quiet math. The timeline suggested the relationship had started several months earlier than previously mentioned, specifically during a period when he had still been publicly dating someone else. Nobody said anything directly, but several people at the table exchanged the same silent expression. The wedding plans continued, just with slightly more curiosity about the timeline. 87. The Christmas Helpful Reminder. At a Christmas gathering in Oregon, one relative brought a small notebook to dinner. She explained that she had been organizing family birthdays so nobody would forget them in the future. The idea sounded thoughtful. She began reading out the dates. Then she added small notes about each person, favorite foods, important life events. At one point she mentioned that one cousin had missed 3 family gatherings in a row the previous year. The cousin looked surprised. Apparently the notebook included far more observations than anyone expected. The list was eventually closed, but several relatives became curious about what else might have been recorded. 88. The Reunion Childhood Story Correction. At a family reunion in Indiana, one uncle began telling a famous story about a cousin's childhood prank that had become part of family history. Everyone had heard the story many times. The cousin had once accidentally broken a neighbor's window with a baseball. This time, however, the cousin interrupted. He explained that the story had never been completely accurate. The ball had not been thrown accidentally. It had been thrown intentionally during an argument with the neighbor's son. The room paused. The original storyteller looked surprised. Apparently, the truth had remained slightly edited for nearly 20 years. The updated version of the story was not repeated again that evening. 89. The Holiday Social Media Tag. At a large holiday gathering in California, one cousin took several photos of the entire family and posted them online immediately. The pictures looked great. Everyone smiled. Then the social media tags began appearing. Names were added to each face in the photo. One relative noticed something strange. A person in the background had been tagged as someone who was not actually present. The name belonged to a former partner of one of the cousins. Apparently, the tagging system had suggested the name automatically based on old photos. The tag was removed quickly, but several relatives had already seen it. 90. The New Year's Midnight Question. At a New Year's Eve family party in Texas, the entire group gathered in the living room to watch the countdown to midnight. Glasses were raised and people began sharing hopes for the coming year. One cousin asked a simple question. What was the biggest surprise everyone experienced this year? Most answers were harmless. New jobs, travel plans. Then one relative mentioned reconnecting with someone important after many years. When asked who it was, he answered casually, "A relative we didn't know we had." The statement sounded mysterious. Several people began asking questions. The countdown reached 0. The new year began. The explanation was postponed. 91. The Thanksgiving Doorbell Surprise. During a Thanksgiving dinner in New Jersey, the entire family had already started eating when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. The host assumed it might be a neighbor dropping something off. Instead, a young man stood on the porch holding a small box of pastries. He politely introduced himself and explained that he had recently been researching his biological family. Several relatives slowly turned toward one particular uncle sitting at the table. The uncle looked surprised. Apparently, the young man had found the address through public records while searching for relatives. The host invited him inside. Dinner continued, but the seating arrangement changed slightly to make room for an unexpected guest. 92. The Christmas Old Friend Visit. During a Christmas gathering in Washington, the family was relaxing in the living room when someone knocked on the door. One cousin answered it and froze for a moment. Standing outside was a person nobody had seen in years. The visitor explained that they had been in the area and thought it would be nice to stop by and say hello. The room stayed polite while introductions were repeated. Then someone quietly remembered why the visitor had stopped attending family events years earlier. Apparently, an argument involving several relatives had ended badly. The reunion was friendly, but the conversation stayed carefully neutral for the rest of the evening. 93. The Reunion Childhood Photo Mystery. At a family reunion in Tennessee, Someone placed several framed photos from old albums on a display table. One image showed a group of relatives standing together at a picnic decades earlier. Most people recognized everyone in the photo, except for one person standing near the edge of the group. Several relatives tried to remember who it was. Eventually, someone explained that the person had once been closely connected to the family, but the relationship had ended suddenly. The explanation stopped there. The photo remained on the table. No one asked additional questions. 94. The holiday gift exchange mix-up. At a holiday gathering in Illinois, the family organized a gift exchange where everyone drew names from a bowl. The system had worked perfectly for years. This time, something unusual happened. Two relatives opened identical gifts. Both packages contained the same item. Both had identical wrapping paper. And both tags were signed by the same person. The giver realized what had happened immediately. Apparently, the gifts had been meant for two completely different gatherings. The mistake was corrected quickly, but several people joked that the exchange system might need better organization next year. 95. The Thanksgiving Timeline Puzzle. During Thanksgiving dinner in California, one cousin casually mentioned that he had recently started dating someone new. The family responded with interest and asked the usual questions. When did they meet? How long had they been together? The cousin answered honestly. Then, someone remembered that he had introduced a different partner at the previous Thanksgiving. The timeline suddenly became confusing. Apparently, the previous relationship had ended much earlier than anyone realized. The cousin clarified that everything had been handled respectfully. The explanation satisfied most people, but the timeline remained slightly complicated. 96. The Christmas Vacation Announcement. At a Christmas dinner in Florida, one cousin announced that he and his partner had recently purchased plane tickets for a long trip overseas. The family congratulated them and asked about the destination. He explained that the trip would last several months. Someone asked if his job allowed that much time off. The cousin paused briefly. Then he explained that he had actually left the job earlier that year. Several relatives looked surprised because the news had never been mentioned before. The conversation shifted toward travel plans, but the career change became the real topic of discussion later that evening. 97. The Reunion Guest Name Problem. At a large reunion in Kentucky, the host tried to greet every arriving guest personally. The event included many distant relatives who had not seen each other in years. One guest approached the host with a friendly smile. The host greeted him warmly, but hesitated when trying to say his name. The guest noticed the pause immediately. He politely introduced himself again. Several other relatives joined the conversation. Within minutes, it became clear that multiple people had forgotten each other's names over the years. Name tags were suggested for the next reunion. 98. The Holiday Dessert Investigation. During a holiday dinner in Arizona, one relative brought a large cake that immediately attracted attention. The decoration was impressive and the presentation looked professional. Several people asked where the recipe had come from. The baker described a long process involving multiple steps and ingredients. Then someone noticed the bakery logo printed faintly on the cake board. The baker laughed and admitted the truth. The cake had been purchased that morning. Everyone agreed it still tasted excellent. 99. The New Year's Family Trivia Surprise. At a New Year's Eve party in Colorado, the family played a trivia game based on family history. One question asked which relative had once lived in another country unexpectedly. Several people guessed incorrectly. Eventually, the answer was revealed. The person was sitting quietly at the table. Apparently, the move had happened many years earlier, during a short period when he had rarely discussed his plans with the family. The story was explained briefly. Then the game continued. But several relatives realized they still had more questions about that year. 100. The Thanksgiving Seating Revelation. During a Thanksgiving dinner in Oregon, the host spent a long time arranging the seating chart to make sure everyone felt comfortable. The plan worked until someone asked why two particular relatives were seated at opposite ends of the table. The host hesitated, then explained that it had been done intentionally. Apparently, the two relatives had once been involved in a disagreement that had never been fully resolved. The explanation surprised several people who had never heard about the conflict before. The dinner continued peacefully. mostly because the seating arrangement had worked exactly as intended. 101. The final holiday realization. At a large holiday gathering in New York, one younger cousin quietly watched the entire evening unfold. People argued about recipes. Someone retold the same childhood story for the fifth time. Two relatives debated the correct version of an event that happened 20 years ago. Another cousin accidentally revealed something they probably meant to keep private. At one point, the younger cousin leaned over and whispered something to his sister. "Every family is strange," she nodded, then pointed toward another table, where several relatives were laughing loudly about something nobody else understood. Maybe that's the whole point. Family gatherings are supposed to be calm, warm, and perfectly organized, but reality usually looks a little different. Someone brings the wrong dish. Someone tells the wrong story. And someone always says something they probably should have kept to themselves. Yet somehow, people keep showing up every year. Because even when family gatherings become awkward, chaotic, or slightly confusing, they're still family. And after seeing 101 of the weirdest family gatherings imaginable, one thing should feel very clear. Your family might be strange, but at least now, you know you're not the only one.